Night had fallen over Willow Creek, the kind of darkness that hides more than it reveals. Nathan sat in his office, thinking of all the corruption he'd uncovered, the lives ruined by Harlow's empire. But nothing had prepared him for the fragile bundle now sleeping quietly nearby. Valor lay at his feet, alert, muscles coiled, sensing the danger that Nathan couldn't yet see. The town whispered, rumors stirring like the wind through the trees. And while humans hesitated, fearful of shadows and secrets, Valor's instincts guided them forward. Because sometimes the bravest hero isn't the one who carries a badge. It's the one who watches, protects, and loves without hesitation. And tonight, that hero would lead Nathan into a truth that could change Willow Creek forever. The morning along the Willow Creek River was still, almost unnaturally so, as though the world itself was holding its breath. A veil of mist clung low over the water, draping the banks in pale secrecy, muting every sound. Even the birds seemed reluctant to break the silence, their songs caught in their throats. The air smelled of damp earth and old wood, the kind of scent that belonged to a place that had witnessed too many secrets and swallowed them whole. From the east, the crunch of tires broke the stillness. A black Cadillac glided down the dirt track, its polished chrome cutting through the fog like a blade of wealth intruding on wilderness. The engine purred low, arrogant and assured, until it quieted with a sigh as the driver pressed it to a stop. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the door opened with a click, far too soft for the weight of what was about to happen. Charles Harlow stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, his silhouette looked carved rather than born. His tailored suit was pressed to perfection, dark as raven feathers against the mist, the fabric imported, cut to fit him like a second skin. On his hands gleamed the unmistakable signs of his fortune, rings of gold and onyx, sharp as crowns. They were not ornaments, they were declarations. Here was a man who had clawed his way to power, who wore his wealth not for beauty, but as proof, as armor. Yet there was nothing warm in his presence. His grey eyes were cold metal, scanning the riverbank not with curiosity, but calculation. His jaw clenched once, a muscle ticking, as if every decision he made was measured on a ledger no one else could see. His empire, built on smuggling routes that threaded through the forests and waterways of the region, had long fattened his pockets and purchased the silence of men weaker than him. But now, here, in this fragile hour, he carried something that threatened to unravel everything. In the back seat lay a wicker basket, simple and unremarkable, save for the thin whimpering that escaped its woven sides. Charles reached in and lifted it, his hands steady, though his breath grew shallow. He set the basket against his chest for a moment, feeling the faint stirrings inside, the soft weight of a newborn, warm and helpless. A sound, high and desperate, leaked into the mist. A baby's cry, weak but insistent, the very sound of life begging to be seen. Charles did not flinch. He did not look down. Instead, his thoughts spiraled inward, sharp and relentless. If this child lives, it ruins everything. The name, the legacy, the clean lines I've drawn for myself, all destroyed by a single mistake. He pictured the whispers that would bloom like wildfire across the town. A smuggler's child, a secret affair. Proof that Charles Harlow was not untouchable after all, but flesh and blood, capable of shame. Fear had always been his most loyal companion. Not the kind that made men cower, but the kind that drove him forward, that whispered of what he stood to lose if he faltered. Scandal was not just embarrassment, it was ruin. And ruin was death for a man like him. Better to erase it now, before the stain spread, before weakness became gossip, and gossip became power torn from his grasp. He walked toward the river's edge, the mud sucking faintly at his Italian leather shoes. The mist thickened around him, curling like fingers, swallowing the Cadillac into shadow. He paused at the waterline, the current tugging gently at the reeds, murmuring of places, far downstream, where no one would ever think to look. The child cried again, louder this time, the sound sharp against the quiet. For just a heartbeat, his mask cracked. His eyes flicked downward, a face no bigger than his hand, twisted in confusion and cold. Tiny fists clawed at the air, fragile and red. A mouth searching, lips trembling, as if pleading with the only figure in its blurred world. Something tugged deep in Charles's chest, a sensation he refused to name. He forced the feeling down. Sentiment is the weakness of small men. Power demands sacrifice. With deliberate calm, he bent, lowering the basket until the wicker brushed the surface of the water. The current licked at it eagerly, nudging it forward. His rings caught the dim light as he pushed, just enough for the river to take hold. The basket rocked, then began to drift. The cries rose higher, shriller, echoing off the water and cutting through the mist like knives. For a fleeting instant, Charles hesitated. His breath came shallow, and in his steel-gray eyes flickered something. Perhaps guilt, perhaps humanity. But then his lips curved into a thin, bitter smile. "This is cleaner," he murmured to himself, voice so low it dissolved into the fog. No papers, no names, no leverage. Just silence. He straightened, hands sliding back into his coat pockets, watching as the river pulled the fragile vessel farther away. The cries grew muffled, swallowed by distance. The fog closed in, devouring sound, devouring evidence. Within moments, the basket was little more than a shadow, trembling on the water, then gone. Charles lingered a moment longer, his expression carved from stone. The world around him remained still, complicit in his cruelty. No bird sang, no wind stirred. Only the river whispered its endless song, carrying with it both the secret and the sin. He turned back to his car, his shoes marked with mud, but his suit unblemished, as though the river itself respected the authority he carried. Sliding behind the wheel, he started the engine. The Cadillac purred, eager to erase the sound of crying that still echoed faintly in his ears. But as he steered the car back up the road, a ripple stirred in the fog across the bank. A shadow shifted among the trees, unseen by Charles Harlow's cold, calculating eyes. The mist concealed it well, but it was there, watching, waiting. And unlike the river, it would not stay silent. The cry was thin, almost lost in the hush of the river, yet it pierced the silence like a blade. It traveled through fog and water until it found the ears of one creature whose instincts had been sharpened by years of training, loyalty, and something older still, an unspoken bond with life itself. Valor froze. The German shepherd's body stiffened, ears pricked forward, amber eyes cutting through the mist. His breath puffed in pale clouds, steady, controlled. He had been walking alongside his handler, Sheriff Nathan Cole, as dawn unfurled over the trees. The sheriff's boots crunched on the gravel road, but Valor's steps were silent, his senses tuned to a frequency most men could never reach. There it was again. A cry, weak, desperate, carried by the current. Not the shrill cry of a fox kit, nor the mew of an injured fawn. This sound was different, humans, small, fragile. Before Nathan could react, Valor lunged forward. His muscles coiled and released in a single motion, his paws striking the earth with a force that sent clumps of dirt scattering. The leash tore free from Nathan's hand. "Valor!" Nathan shouted, startled, but the dog didn't stop. His body blurred into the fog, swallowed by gray. The sheriff's pulse spiked. He trusted Valor's instincts. They had saved lives before, uncovered things no man's eye could. But this urgency, this reckless speed, meant something was terribly wrong. Nathan broke into a run. His heart hammered as he chased the sound of claws against rock, his breath tearing in the cold air. But Valor was already ahead, a shadow in the mist, drawn to the cry that had nearly vanished beneath the roar of the river. At the bank, Valor skidded to a halt, claws digging furrows in the wet earth. His eyes locked on the wicker basket, drifting in the current like a forgotten relic. It rocked violently, half swallowed by water. A feeble hand waved from beneath the blanket, a spark of life about to be extinguished. A guttural growl rumbled deep in Valor's chest. His body crouched, every line of him taut, like a spring wound too tight. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. The river was swollen from recent rains, the current treacherous, biting cold. But hesitation was not in his nature. With a single bound, Valor launched himself into the water. The shock of the freezing current closed around him instantly. The river clawed at his fur, dragging him sideways, pulling at his strength. His head bobbed once beneath the surface, before he surged upward, shaking water from his eyes, ears pinned back against the force. His legs churned like pistons, driving him forward through the current. The basket dipped, rolled. A piercing cry cut through the fog. Thinner now, weaker. Nathan burst through the trees just in time to see Valor in the water. His breath caught, panic slicing through him. "Hold on, boy!" he shouted, voice raw. "Get it, Valor!" The German shepherd answered not with sound but with motion, lunging against the current, each stroke bringing him closer. His fur clung slick to his body, revealing the sheer power beneath. The cold gnawed at his limbs, but instinct burned hotter than the water's bite. The river hissed around him, snapping against rocks, spinning him in tight eddies. The basket was slipping farther out, carried toward the deeper channel where no rescue would be possible. Nathan stumbled down the muddy bank, boots sinking, powerless to help except with his voice. "Go, Valor!" he bellowed. The shepherd pushed harder. His nose broke the surface with each stroke, eyes never leaving the fragile bundle. The current slammed him sideways, but he corrected, muscles screaming with effort. Another yard, another desperate surge. Finally, his jaws closed around the wicker handle. The taste of river-soaked reed filled his mouth, bitter and cold, but he clenched harder, refusing to let go. The basket lurched, nearly capsizing, before Valor adjusted his hold, angling his body to keep it above water. The child inside whimpered, too weak for a full cry now. The sound drove Valor onward. He turned, fighting the drag of the current with every ounce of strength. His lungs burned, his body trembled, but he swam with a single-minded fury that no tide could match. On shore, Nathan raced along the bank, his heart slamming against his ribs. He shouted encouragement, though his throat was raw with fear. He had seen Valor perform miracles before, tracking fugitives, disarming armed men, but never had the stakes been so raw, so heartbreakingly small. The shepherd's paws found purchase on a submerged rock. He heaved, water cascading from his body, basket gripped tight in his jaws. Inch by inch, he dragged himself forward, claws scratching against stone, muscles trembling. Finally, with a desperate push, he stumbled onto the bank, collapsing onto wet earth, the basket safe between his teeth. Nathan was on them in seconds. He dropped to his knees, hands trembling as he pulled the basket close. The blanket had slipped halfway off, revealing a tiny red face twisted in confusion and cold. The baby's fists fluttered weakly, its chest rising and falling with fragile gasps. "Oh my God!" Nathan's voice cracked. He tore off his jacket, wrapping it around the child in shaking hands. His pulse thundered in his ears as he pressed the baby to his chest, feeling the faint warmth against him. Valor lay beside them, sides heaving, water dripping from his muzzle. His eyes, dark, steady, watched Nathan intently, as though asking, "Did I make it in time?" Nathan looked down at him, throat tight. "You did, boy," he whispered hoarsely. "You saved them." But the relief was fragile, balanced on the thin thread of a newborn's breath. The baby whimpered again, softer now, a sound that cut Nathan to the bone. He knew the hospital was the only chance. He had minutes, not hours. He cradled the child tighter, scooping the basket under his arm, and rose to his feet. His boots slipped in the mud as he turned toward the patrol truck. Vala staggered up beside him, still dripping, still panting, but unwilling to let his handler move alone. The shepherd pressed against Nathan's leg, eyes never leaving the fragile life they had dragged from the jaws of the river. The fog closed in again as they ran, wrapping the bank in silence once more. Behind them, the river rolled on, its surface smooth, indifferent, as if it had never tried to swallow a child. Nathan Cole had seen many things in his years wearing the badge, accidents on back roads, bar fights that ended in tragedy, even the lifeless stillness of bodies pulled from the river after spring floods. But nothing prepared him for the sight before him now. Valor lay soaked and trembling on the muddy bank, his chest rising and falling in deep, ragged breaths, water still streaming from his fur. Between his paws rested the wicker basket, its weave darkened by the river, its contents quivering with faint, fragile cries. Nathan dropped to his knees. His hand shook as he pulled the wet blanket aside, revealing the tiny form inside. A newborn, skin raw and pink from cold, fists clenching with the last of its strength. Its lips trembled as it gasped for breath, each sound more like a plea than a cry. "Oh, Lord," Nathan whispered, his throat closing tight. He had faced men armed with rifles, stared down smugglers ready to pull triggers, but never had his hands trembled like this. His duty as sheriff had always been to protect the town, to uphold the law. Yet what stirred inside him now was something more primal, more intimate. It wasn't just duty. It was protectiveness, fierce and unrelenting, the kind that could anchor a man's soul. The infant's tiny hand brushed against his finger. Instinctively, those impossibly small fingers curled and gripped him, weak but determined, as if begging not to be let go. That touch, delicate, desperate, sent a jolt through Nathan's chest. "You're safe now," he murmured, though his voice cracked. "You hear me? You're safe." He shrugged off his sheriff's jacket, wrapping it tightly around the child, holding the trembling body against his chest. The warmth of his own body seeped into the baby, but it wasn't enough. He knew the truth. Minutes mattered. If he delayed, this fragile life could slip away. Nathan looked down at Valor. The dog's side still heaved, but his dark eyes were steady, locked on the bundle Nathan cradled. There was no doubt in those eyes, no hesitation. Valor had risked everything to drag that basket from the river. He had given Nathan the chance to save what would have been lost. "Good boy," Nathan whispered hoarsely, laying a hand on the wet fur of Valor's neck. "You saved them. Now let's finish it." With the baby wrapped in his arms, Nathan sprinted up the slope toward the patrol truck. The mud pulled at his boots, nearly toppling him, but he pushed harder, lungs burning. Valor followed despite his exhaustion, limping at first, then regaining rhythm, unwilling to leave his partner's side. The truck door slammed open. Nathan slid inside, clutching the baby to his chest with one arm while twisting the key with the other. The engine roared awake, headlights cutting through the fog. He pressed his foot hard on the accelerator. Gravel spat out behind them as the patrol truck lurched forward, racing away from the river. The infant whimpered, a thin sound muffled against his chest. Nathan adjusted his hold, murmuring broken reassurances. "Stay with me, little one. Just stay with me." His voice was steady for the child, though inside, fear carved sharp lines into his heart. The hospital in Willow Creek was small, a squat brick building that doubled as clinic and emergency ward. But it was the only hope. Nathan drove like a man possessed, his siren wailing, the world blurring past the windshield. By the time he screeched into the hospital lot, nurses were already spilling out the front doors, drawn by the sound of the siren. Nathan leapt from the cab, the baby pressed close, Valor bounding at his side, dripping water across the pavement. "She's hypothermic," Nathan's voice boomed, urgency replacing his usual calm authority. "Get warm blankets now." A nurse rushed forward, but when she reached for the child, Nathan hesitated, clutching tighter. His arms refused to release their grip. For a heartbeat, the sheriff and the nurse stood frozen, the world narrowed to Nathan's unwillingness to let go. The baby whimpered again, lips bluish. Nathan forced himself to breathe. This wasn't about him. "Please," he said finally, his voice raw. "Save them." The nurse nodded and carefully took the child, wrapping her in a flurry of blankets as other staff hurried her inside. Nathan followed, his boots echoing down the tiled corridor, Valor padding beside him despite the nurse's protests about dogs in the hospital. In the emergency room, monitors beeped, machines hummed. Nathan stood near the doorway, every muscle tense as the doctors worked. Tiny hands were rubbed, oxygen tubes adjusted, blankets piled high. The cries grew a little stronger, then steadier, and the sound was the sweetest Nathan had ever heard. Finally, the doctor turned, peeling off his gloves. "Sheriff Cole," he said, his voice calm but firm, "the child is going to make it." Relief broke over Nathan so suddenly it left him weak. He let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his hand instinctively finding Valor's wet fur. The dog pressed against his leg, eyes never leaving the crib where the baby now lay under careful watch. Nathan stepped closer. The child stirred, opening eyes for the briefest moment, dark, searching, unfocused. Yet when Nathan extended a hand, the tiny fingers reached once more, curling weakly around him. And in that fragile grip, something settled inside Nathan's chest. Not duty, not obligation. Something deeper, a bond. He knew he couldn't walk away, not from this child, not from whatever story had been set into motion on that mist-filled riverbank. "Who left you there?" he whispered softly, as if the infant could answer. "And why would anyone want to hide you from the world?" The baby's only reply was another fragile cry, muffled against the blankets. Yet in that sound, Nathan heard more than desperation. He heard defiance, life refusing to be silenced. Nathan straightened, resolving hardening in his eyes. Whatever secret had been cast into the current, it had reached the wrong man's hands. This was no longer just an abandoned child. This was a crime that demanded answers, and Nathan Cole, with Valor at his side, would not rest until he found them. The emergency ward of Willow Creek General was a blur of motion. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting pale halos over the narrow beds and stainless steel trays. Nurses barked orders to one another in quick, clipped voices, their shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. At the center of it all was the newborn, so small, so fragile, swaddled in layers of warmed cotton, as monitors beeped in nervous rhythms. Nathan Cole stood just inside the doorway, his broad frame filling the threshold, his hat still clutched in his hands. He wasn't used to feeling powerless. As sheriff, he'd always had something to do, an order to give, a step to take, a weapon to draw if it came to that. But now, his entire world had shrunk to that single, trembling child whose future was balanced on a knife's edge. Valor sat pressed against his leg, dripping river water onto the polished tile. No one had the heart to shoot the German shepherd out. His amber eyes tracked the baby's every movement, ears flicking at each wail. It was as though he, too, understood the gravity of what was unfolding. "Heart rate stabilizing," one of the nurses said, her voice steadier now. She adjusted the oxygen tubing gently over the infant's tiny nose. Another nurse tucked a heated blanket closer. Colors improving. Nathan's grip on his hat loosened slightly, though his jaw remained tight. He took one hesitant step closer, his boots clicking against the floor. The smell of antiseptic and warm fabric filled the air. The baby whimpered, no longer the ragged gasp of one teetering between life and death, but the sharper, more insistent cry of a newborn who had survived the worst. It cut Nathan to the core. He swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting in his eyes. "Sheriff," the doctor said finally, peeling off his gloves and moving closer. "You brought this child just in time. Another 20 minutes in that river and—" His voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish. Nathan nodded once, words stuck in his throat. He glanced down at Valor, whose tail thumped weakly against the floor, as if he understood the verdict. The doctor turned back to the baby. "We'll keep monitoring. Hypothermia is dangerous, but children are resilient. This little one has a fighting spirit." Nathan took a step toward the crib. His shadow stretched long across the bed, draping over the tiny body. For a moment, he was afraid to reach out, afraid he might break something so delicate. But then, as if guided by instinct, he extended his hand. The baby's fingers stirred beneath the blanket, small, wrinkled, impossibly weak. Yet when Nathan's finger brushed close, the hand latched on. The grip was feather-light, but to Nathan it felt like iron. That little hand clung to him with all the desperation of a soul refusing to be let go. His breath hitched. He closed his eyes, overcome, clinging to life, and to me. In that instant, something shifted deep inside him. The world outside, his badge, his responsibilities, the corruption that darkened Willow Creek, fell away. There was only this child, gripping his finger as if tethering itself to him, choosing him. Nathan cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice. "You're a fighter," he whispered. "Just like your mama must have been." The nurses moved quietly around him, giving space they hadn't consciously decided to give. There was something sacred about the sight of the sheriff standing over that crib, his finger caught in the grip of a life that nearly slipped away. Valor gave a low chuff, leaning his head against Nathan's thigh. The dog's fur was still damp, but his body radiated warmth. Nathan reached down with his free hand, fingers brushing the strong ridge of Valor's neck. "You hear that, boy?" Nathan murmured, his voice husky. "We didn't lose him." The baby stirred again, a soft whimper escaping. Nathan bent lower, his face inches from the fragile bundle. The scent of warmed cotton and infant skin was overwhelming, stirring something paternal and protective he hadn't felt in years. Not since holding his niece when she was born, long before life had hardened him into the man he had become. "You're safe now," he said again, firmer this time. As if the words themselves could build a wall between the baby and the darkness waiting outside. The doctor returned, adjusting the monitors. "Sheriff, we'll need to run more tests. Make sure there's no infection, no lingering damage. But I think you can breathe easier now. The worst has passed." Nathan straightened slowly, exhaling a long breath. For the first time since Valor had bolted into the mist, he allowed himself to feel relief. Still, a shadow crept at the edges of his mind. This wasn't an accident. Someone had meant for this child to die in that river. Someone powerful, ruthless enough to discard blood like refuse. He looked down at the baby's hand, still curled tight around his finger, refusing to release him. That grip carried more weight than a badge, more binding than a court order. "Whoever you are," Nathan thought grimly, "I'll find the truth. For you, for her, for this town." The infant let out a tiny sigh, eyes fluttering open for just a flicker. Dark eyes, unfocused but searching, locking with his for the briefest of moments. Nathan felt his chest tighten. It was as though the child was asking a question without words, and his answer was immediate. "I'm not letting go," he whispered. "Not now. Not ever." The machines beeped steadily. Nurses continued their work. But for Nathan Cole, time had narrowed to a single fragile connection. His finger clasped in the hand of a child who should have been lost, yet wasn't. Beside him, Valor shifted, lowering himself onto the cool tile. His head rested on his paws, eyes never leaving the crib. He looked every bit the sentinel, the unspoken guardian of a life he had saved. And in that quiet hospital room, with the storm of corruption still waiting outside, Nathan Cole understood the truth. This was no ordinary case. This was the beginning of something that would test his strength, his faith, and his very soul. But as the baby's grip tightened ever so slightly around his finger, Nathan knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not face it alone. The night air outside the hospital was cool and sharp, carrying with it the faint scent of pine from the hills around Willow Creek. Nathan stepped onto the porch, hat in one hand, the other pressed against his brow, as though trying to rub away the storm gathering behind his eyes. Inside, the baby rested in a warmer, watched by nurses who moved with quiet diligence. For now, the child was safe. But Nathan's gut told him this was only the beginning. Valor padded out beside him, fur still damp but drying, his gait steady again. He sat at Nathan's boots, amber eyes lifting to his handler's face. A silent question lingered there, one that only deepened Nathan's unease. The wicker basket sat on a bench by the door. Its weave was frayed, water-stained, still carrying the faint musty odor of river mud. Nathan crouched down in front of it, fingertips brushing over the rough surface. Something about the weight of it still unsettled him, like the basket carried more than the baby it had held. He shifted the sodden blankets aside, searching almost without knowing what he sought. That was when his hand caught on something stiff, something hidden beneath the folds of fabric. A sealed envelope. Nathan froze. His heart gave one solid thump against his ribs. The paper was damp along the edges, ink blurred faintly by water, but the seal, an unremarkable wax press, still held. He turned it over carefully. No name on the outside, no address, only the faint, hurried scrawl across the flap. "For whoever finds my child." Nathan sat back on the bench, the envelope trembling faintly in his hands. Valor gave a low chuff, tilting his head as if sensing the gravity of the moment. With deliberate care, Nathan broke the seal. The paper inside crackled as he unfolded it, smoothed it across his knee, and began to read. The handwriting was hurried, uneven, written by a hand under great strain. But the words carved straight into him. "To the one who saves my child, If you are reading this, then fate has given my son another chance. I could not keep him safe. The man who fathered him, Charles Harlow, would rather see him drowned than let the world know he exists. He is a man of wealth and power, made rich by blood and smuggling, and he fears nothing more than scandal. My child is his greatest shame. Nathan's jaw tightened. The porch light above cast the page in a pale glow, the words trembling in his grip. Harlow lured me with promises of love, then chained me with threats when I carried his child. He owns the courts, the council, the very deputies who should uphold the law. He thinks himself untouchable, but I cannot let him erase us completely. So I leave behind two things, my son and the truth. Nathan's breath caught as the next lines grew darker, heavier. Harlow hides evidence of his crimes within Willow Creek. Ledgers, names, shipments. He built his empire on the river, and so the river will undo him. If anyone has the courage to stand against him, they will find what they need where the pines meet the water, in the shadow of the old mill. I could not reach it, but perhaps you can. The words blurred briefly as Nathan blinked hard against the burn in his eyes. His thumb traced the lines again, lingering on the final sentences. I do not ask for my life. Mine is already forfeit. But I beg of you, let my child live. Let him grow in a world not poisoned by Harlow's cruelty. This is my confession. This is my plea. May God forgive me for leaving him, and may whoever finds this have the strength I did not. The letter ended there. No name signed at the bottom, though the desperation in each stroke carried more weight than any signature could. Nathan folded the page slowly, carefully, as if afraid it might disintegrate in his hands. He sat in silence for a long moment, the night pressing in, the sound of distant crickets filling the stillness. Valor leaned against his leg, a quiet anchor. Nathan finally exhaled, the sound rough in his throat. So it's true, he muttered. It wasn't just a chance. It wasn't just abandonment. This was deliberate. He stared down the road, toward the dark silhouette of the hills where the river carved its path, where the pines meet the water, the old mill. He knew the place. Everyone in Willow Creek did. It had been abandoned for years, a relic of another era long since swallowed by weeds and rumor. But now it held something more, something dangerous. Nathan tucked the letter back into its envelope, sliding it into his coat. His mind churned. He knew what this meant. To follow this trail was to step into open war with Charles Harlow, the richest, most ruthless man in the county. He thought of the council meetings where Harlow's donations bought silence, the police reports that vanished when his name surfaced, the fear in the eyes of townsfolk when his Cadillac rolled down Main Street, and now a child's cry in the mist, a desperate letter, and a river that nearly claimed another innocent life. Nathan looked back through the hospital window. The baby was there, curled small in the warmer, chest rising and falling with fragile determination. The child's fingers twitched faintly, as if reaching even through sleep. "I won't let him touch you," Nathan whispered, voice low but firm. "I swear it." Valor lifted his head at the sound of his partner's vow. The shepherd's ears pricked, a quiet growl rumbling in his chest, not from fear, but from the instinctive readiness to protect. Nathan rested his hand on the dog's back. "Looks like we're in this together, partner. Against Harlow. Against every lie he's built." For the first time that night, Nathan felt something ignite inside him. Not just anger, not just duty. Resolve. The envelope in his coat weighed heavy, but not as heavy as the promise he had just made. A mother's words had reached him across the void, across fear and cruelty. She had left her plea in the hands of fate, and fate, it seemed, had chosen him. He rose slowly, adjusting his hat, eyes set on the dark horizon. The fight ahead would be ruthless. But tonight, as the baby slept safely and Valor stood guard at his side, Nathan Cole made a vow as binding as blood. The truth would not stay buried. The sheriff's office sat at the far end of Main Street, its windows glowing faintly against the quiet night. Outside, Willow Creek had already fallen into slumber. Porch lights winked out one by one, and the hum of late-night traffic dwindled to silence. But inside those walls, Nathan Cole remained awake, his desk lamp burning like a lone sentinel against the dark. The office smelled of old paper and worn leather, with a faint trace of gun oil clinging to the air. Files sat stacked in weary towers, cases that had never quite found resolution, victims who had never quite seen justice. Nathan leaned forward in his chair, elbows on the desk, hat set aside, his brow furrowed deep. The envelope lay open before him. The letter, now dried and carefully pressed flat, stared back with damning clarity. He had read it a dozen times since leaving the hospital. Each word cut deeper. Each plea etched itself further into his mind. Charles Harlow would rather see him drowned than let the world know he exists. The sentence alone made Nathan's fists clench until the leather of his chair creaked. He had known Harlow was ruthless, had seen the man manipulate land sales, crush small businesses, and twist local politics to his advantage. But this was cruelty of another order. He let out a slow breath, his gaze wandering to the wall across from him. There, pinned beneath yellowing tacks, were photographs from old cases, raids on bootleg operations, smuggling busts on the river, grainy surveillance shots of unmarked trucks rolling through the valley at night. Every line, every trail, had always led back to the same man. And yet, every time Nathan had tried to follow, the case would collapse. Witnesses recanted. Evidence disappeared. Judges dismissed charges. Harlow's shadow reached everywhere. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment, leaning back in his chair. He could almost hear the whispers of the past, conversations behind closed doors, warnings from officials who claimed to be on his side but weren't. "Best leave this one alone, Sheriff. Harlow's untouchable. No case without evidence, Cole. You want to keep your badge, you'll back off." The memory burned. How many times had he walked away because the system demanded it? How many nights had he gone home knowing justice had been sold to the highest bidder? He opened his eyes again and looked down at the letter. This time there was no turning away. This wasn't just about exposing smuggling routes or cleaning up town council. This was about a newborn left to die in a river, a mother's plea written in shaking hands. And the truth was simple. If he let this go, he'd never be able to look at himself again. Valor shifted at his feet, letting out a low, steady breath. The German shepherd had been silent since they'd come in, as if he too sensed the weight pressing down on the room. His ears twitched in the lamplight, his gaze fixed on Nathan. "You feel it too, don't you, boy?" Nathan murmured, reaching down to rest a hand on the thick ruff of fur along Valor's neck. The dog's warmth grounded him, steadied him in a way no drink, no distraction ever could. Storm's coming. Harlow's not going to let this slide. Valor's tail tapped once against the wood floor, quiet, firm, a sound more like agreement than comfort. Nathan leaned back, pulling a fresh sheet of paper toward him. His pen scratched across it slowly, carefully, as he began drafting notes. Not a formal report. He wasn't ready to put this in the official record yet. Too many eyes, too many leaks. No, this was for himself. A map, a vow. He wrote down the baby's condition, the letter, the mention of the old mill, each piece of the puzzle in black ink. Then, beneath it, he wrote one simple line. This is bigger than one child. This is the soul of Willow Creek. He sat back, the words staring at him like a challenge. The lamplight flickered faintly, catching in the glass of the framed badge on the wall. Sheriff. A title that meant more than a job. It was a responsibility, a covenant with the people who lived under his watch. And yet, for years, that covenant had been broken, twisted by men like Harlow. Nathan reached for the badge, unhooking it from the wall. He turned it in his hand, the metal cool against his palm. For a long time, he had wondered if it still meant anything, if the law could still stand for justice in a town where power bought silence. But tonight, with that letter open before him and valor keeping vigil at his feet, he found his answer. It means what we make it mean, he whispered. No more excuses, no more backing down. His reflection in the badge was hard, weathered by years of compromise. But now, there was something else in his eyes, something sharper, resolve. Nathan set the badge back against his chest, fastening it in place. Then he folded the letter one last time, sliding it into the inner pocket of his coat. It would not leave his side again. He looked down at Valor, who had lifted his head expectantly. From here on out, we're not just chasing shadows. We're dragging them into the light. The dog gave a low rumble, not quite a bark, more like the sound of thunder rolling across distant hills. Nathan blew out the lamp, plunging the office into darkness. Only the faint glow of the moon through the window remained, casting long silver beams across the floor. He stood there a moment longer, the silence heavy, the night alive with possibility. And in that quiet, he made his vow, not out loud, not for anyone else's ears, but in the marrow of his bones. He would see this through. For the mother whose trembling hand had written those words, for the child who had clutched his finger in the hospital, for every man and woman in Willow Creek who had lived too long under Harlow's shadow. Justice was no longer a question. It was a promise. Valor settled back onto the floor, content, as though he understood that the die had been cast. And Nathan Cole, sheriff of Willow Creek, stared out the window into the night, knowing that the fight ahead would cost him more than he could yet imagine, but determined, for the first time in years, to pay the price. Morning broke over Willow Creek to the clang of the church bell and the hiss of percolators. By the time sunlight spilled across Main Street, news had already run ahead of it. A baby in the river, a sheriff's dog that pulled him out. It started at the diner. Old men hunched over coffee, farmers in mud-caked boots, spoons clinking like tiny gongs. A whisper moved booth to booth, catching on napkin edges and the rims of cups. I heard Valor drag the basket with his teeth. They say the kid was blue till Cole rushed him in. And whose child do you think it was? No one answered, but glances drifted to a ranch hand in the corner, cap tugged low, mumbling about the Harlow estate. At the general store, gossip moved faster than change across the counter. Mrs. Talbot leaned over flour sacks to a young mother. Mark my words, if a baby was left in that river, someone powerful wanted him gone. The mother's eyes flicked to the door. You think Harlow? Mrs. Talbot raised her brows and let silence do the talking. By noon, the school steps buzzed. Teachers dodged the subject. Children didn't. The sheriff's dog saved a baby. They breathed, wide-eyed. Some swore they'd seen Valor that morning, black and tan coat shining, pacing beside Nathan Cole like a creature out of legend. Beneath the awe ran fear. In the barber shop, voices stayed low, buried under the snip of scissors. "You stir, Harlow." He stares back with a shotgun. Hank Dillard muttered at his reflection. "Maybe it's time someone did," came a softer reply that sounded brave until it reached the door. The barber kept his razor quiet. He knew how loud Harlow's name could be. Nathan felt it firsthand, walking Maine. His badge caught the sun. His gratitude caught in other people's throats. Some faces warmed with pride, as if saving the child gave them permission to hope. Others cut away, unwilling to be seen too near a sheriff who might be in Harlow's sights by nightfall. Valor padded tight to his side, head high, reading the town with his eyes. Children whispered his name. Grown men crossed the street. By late afternoon, talk grew bolder, drifting into places long famous for it. Evelyn's diner, the feed store, the post office steps. Old stories resurfaced like rot in wet wood. Unmarked trucks after midnight, headlights doused as they slipped toward the docks. Prohibition liquor that at times was something else entirely. Guns, stones, or people in crates. Every rumor traced the same route: Charles Harlow. He'd built fear into an industry, smuggling into a fortune, and crowned it with a mansion that looked imported from another world. His Cadillac drifted down Main like a ship in black glass. A windows up, sidewalks quieted by its shadow. The baby changed something. Those stories didn't feel like rumors anymore. They felt like a root system finally breaking the surface. At dusk, the saloon filled. Whiskey, a piano, and a topic no song could drown. "You think Cole's gonna take him on?" He'd be a fool not to back down. Harlow's buried bigger men. "Yeah, but this time there's a child." Laughter followed, bitter, not amused. In Willow Creek, children didn't stop the storm. They only made it crueler. Yet faces glowed with something not seen in years. Possibility. The sheriff, the dog, the baby. 3 points on a new compass. Proof the grip wasn't absolute. By nightfall, the whispers had threaded the town until the whole place seemed to breathe them. Nathan stood at the edge of Main, looking back at lamplight in windows. He could feel the eyes and doubts circling, even in silence. Valor pressed against his leg and gazed toward the hills where the Harlow estate darkened the skyline. "They're talking," Nathan said, half afraid, half hoping. Valor chuffed. "They're not wrong to fear," Nathan added, a faint wry tug at his mouth. "But maybe it's time they hoped for more." Stars pricked the sky like nails in velvet. Somewhere beyond those hills, Charles Harlow waited for a report that would curdle his bourbon. Here in town, whispers hardened into a beginning. The Harlow estate loomed like arrogance hewn in stone. Sycamores lining the drive, their branches shivering in a wind that seemed to know better. Inside the study, Charles Harlow stood with a glass in hand. The hearth glowed. The warmth never reached him. On his desk, a damp town paper. Sheriff's dog saves infant from river. A grainy photograph, Valor dripping, jaws clamped to a wicker handle. Harlow's jaw tensed. He threw the bourbon back and slammed the glass, cracking it on the rim. "The child survived," he said, almost to himself, the disbelief barbed. He should have been gone. The door eased open. 2 lieutenants entered, powerful, silent, their suits unmarked, their fear of him as visible as a badge. "Sir," the taller one said carefully, "confirmation just came in. The baby's alive. Sheriff Cole took it to the hospital. Word's all over town." I don't need news I can smell, Harlow snapped. I need an explanation. How? His voice broke into a roar. How did a mangy mutt undo everything? No one knew the dog would be there, the shorter one said, eyes flicking to the busted glass. No one knew Cole was patrolling that stretch. No one predicted? Harlow's tone iced. He stepped close, a hand on the man's shoulder, almost paternal, until the rings bit skin. I don't pay you to forecast. I pay you to erase. And now, he shoved him away. We have a stain. He paced, raked a hand through silver hair. Isabel's name flashed in his head. The letter she'd dared to write. The evidence she'd dared to leave. Her defiance clawed at him. Those words were in Nathan Cole's hands now. He swept the desk clear. Paper, pens, the cracked glass shattered across the floor. The portraits of dead Harlows rattled in their frames. Do you fools understand? His voice thundered. If Cole pushes, the docs, the judges, the council, the whole machine comes apart. I built an empire. Now it teeters on a child's cry. The taller lieutenant swallowed. Your orders? Harlow's eyes sharpened, steel grey and cutting. Loose ends. Cut them. All of them. Anyone who might talk. Shut them up. And Cole? His smile was a thin incision. Teach him what happens to men who put their noses where they don't belong. Killing him outright could... The shorter one began. I didn't say kill, Harlow hissed, yanking him close by the collar, bourbon on his breath, rage underneath. Break him. Strip his allies. Make him doubt his badge, his town, himself. If he still refuses to bend... He tightened his grip. Then he disappears, same as that child should have. He shoved the man back and returned to the window. Twilight crawled over the hills. Somewhere the sheriff held paper that could burn him. Somewhere a baby slept. Proof his sins weren't deep enough in the ground. You think you can shame me, Isabel? He murmured to his reflection. Reach from the grave with your little letters. No. I will bury every trace. No sheriff, no dog, no bastard child will change that. The fire snapped. His shadow stretched crooked across the rug. The lieutenants kept silent. In a single breath, he rebuttoned his mask. Jacket smoothed, cufflinks straight, hair precise. Go, he said. You know what to do. They left. Alone again, he poured another drink, hands still trembling. He stared into the amber and saw only his own face, then a wicker basket drifting through mist, a baby's cry, a dog's jaw clamped like a verdict. For the first time in years, fear slid cold into his gut. He despised it. Night fell heavy, turning cabins into islands. Nathan's place glowed at the clearing's edge. Inside, the fire snapped soft. The baby slept in a borrowed crib, breath steady at last. At the desk, the letter lay open. Nathan read it again, though he didn't need to. Valor stretched out on the rug, ears relaxed but listening, as if breathing with the night. We're in deep, partner, Nathan said, rubbing his temples. Deeper than we've ever been. Valor's head lifted, not at the words, but at a sound too faint for most ears. No snow, but something cracked, light as a twig pulled by weight. The dog's body went from loose rope to drawn wire. Ears forward, eyes hard, a growl so low it seemed to come from the floorboards. Nathan followed the stare into the window's blackness, trees swaying, Shadows piled on shadows. His gut tightened. He'd learned not to doubt what Valor told him. He stood, crossed to the rifle by the door, eased the lantern down to darkness. Embers washed the room in dull red. "Easy," he whispered, hand to the shepherd's shoulder. "Show me." Valor flowed to the window, silent as thought. Nathan peered beside him. There, an extra shadow slipping among shadows, too purposeful to be wind. A shape that paused, then vanished, watching. Hair rose at his nape. He thought of Isabel's handwriting, of Harlow's name like a bruise across the page, of the baby asleep not 10 feet away. The low growl sharpened. Teeth flashed. "I see him," Nathan breathed, the rifle snug into his shoulder. The shape lingered at the edge of vision, patient as a hunter. Not lost, measuring distance, counting steps to the door. Nathan wanted to throw a warning shot skyward, to say, "I see you," but a colder instinct warned against it. Let the shadow believe in his advantage. Let him show himself first. Minutes stretched thin. The fire popped again. Outside, the wind hissed through pines, masking the tiny crunches of weight moving across needles. Valor lunged up at the sill and barked, a single thunderous warning that split the clearing open. The shadow recoiled. Nathan caught the brief glint of metal. Maybe a knife, maybe glass, maybe a scope. Broad shoulders, a pivot back into trees. "Not tonight," Nathan called, throwing the door open and stepping onto the porch. "You picked the wrong house." Silence answered. Not absence, only retreat. Shadows don't vanish. They wait. Valor dropped from the porch and paced the edge of the clearing, growl deep and steady. He stopped at one patch of dark and stared into it, ears locked like compass needles. Nathan kept the rifle shouldered, eyes sweeping the trees. Whoever it was had melted into the forest, but presence hung like smoke after a match. This was not a chance passerby. After a long, taut minute, Valor's growl eased to a hum. Nathan lowered the rifle a fraction. His pulse didn't. "Yeah," he told the dog. "I felt it too. Harlow's men. They're sniffing." Valor came back and leaned hard into Nathan's leg, as if to say, "They won't pass me." Inside, the baby stirred and cried small. Nathan turned, crossed to the crib. Tiny fists clenched. Eyelids fluttered. He slipped a finger into the little palm. It latched on, holding with a strength that startled him. "Don't worry, little one," he whispered. "They'll have to get through both of us first." Valor lay beside the crib, eyes on the door. Every creak of timber, every shift of wind, he caught and judged. The cabin settled again. The peace felt thin as glass. Nathan knew what the town's whispers had already taught him. Harlow's reach was long, and tonight was only the first knock. Outside, the forest breathed. Somewhere in the dark, a man slid away, footfalls swallowed by needles, carrying news uphill to the mansion. The child lives, the sheriff is ready, and the dog is a problem. The morning after the restless night cut sharper than most. The chill carried the damp breath of the river, and the pines around Willow Creek whispered like sentinels that had seen something move in the dark. Sheriff Nathan Cole hadn't slept. He sat by the fire with the baby swaddled close, Valor growling softly at every sound near the door. By dawn, Nathan made a decision. The letter left too many shadows unanswered, and there was only one person in town who might know the missing pieces. Donna Marisol. Her adobe house sat behind a grove of apricot trees at the southern ridge. For decades, she had been Willow Creek's keeper of secrets, midwife, healer, confidant. Some called her a relic. Others whispered she had a gift. No one denied her wisdom. Nathan drove out with the infant strapped in a borrowed car seat. Vala leapt into the back, gaze fixed on the winding gravel road, as if he already knew this trip mattered. The air smelled of apricots when Nathan arrived. Marisol was outside, tending herbs in clay pots. She straightened slowly when she saw him, her back stiff but her eyes bright. "Sheriff Cole," she greeted, her Spanish lilt soft. "I was wondering when you would come. You've heard? This town breathes into my walls, hijo. A baby pulled from the river. News like that travels fast." Her eyes slid to the child in the seat, and a shadow crossed her face. "I need answers," Nathan said. "The letter mentions Isabel. You knew her?" Marisol's voice dropped. "Yes. I held her hand the night she gave birth." Nathan's pulse quickened. "Then she didn't die?" "No. At least not that night." The words froze the room. If Isabel lived, everything changed. "There were men," Marisol whispered. "Men tied to Charles Harlow. They changed the records. Some say she was taken away, hidden, silenced, but alive." Nathan clenched his jaw. If Isabel was alive, she was the one person who could destroy Harlow. "Do you know where she is?" Marisol shook her head. "I only know she loved that child with every breath. When they carried her away, she still reached for him. That love does not fade." Nathan glanced at the infant, stirring lightly in his blanket. He swallowed hard. She left a letter. She named Harlow, begged for the child's safety. Marisol nodded gravely. Too brave for a world ruled by men like him. She leaned closer, her tone warning. "Be careful, hijo. If Isabel is alive, she is Harlow's greatest fear, and you, carrying her child, have become his greatest enemy." Nathan felt the weight of it in his chest. And the old woman pressed a bundle into his hands, a tarnished silver pendant etched with a blooming rose. "Her mark," Marisol whispered. "Carry it. It may lead her back." Nathan left with the baby in his arms, Vala tense at his side. The apricot trees whispered in the wind, but Marisol's words stayed with him. If she breathes, she dreams of finding him again. The Willow Creek Clinic sat at the edge of Main Street, a squat brick building with peeling paint. In daylight it looked harmless, but Nathan knew better. Truths could vanish here as easily as ink erased from paper. He parked in the alley, Vala at his heel, and stepped inside. The air smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. A nurse at the desk froze when she saw him. "I need records," Nathan said evenly. "A birth 3 months ago. Isabel Martinez." The nurse hesitated, then fetched a thin folder. Inside, the name wasn't Isabel. It was Marina Lopez. The certificate looked too neat, too deliberate, like someone had scrubbed life out of the details. "Funny," Nathan said, eyes on her. "I heard Isabel delivered here." The nurse faltered, her hands trembling. Vala's growl filled the silence. "They told me to file it that way," she whispered. "Dr. Hale said it was for the clinic's safety. If I questioned it, I'd lose everything." "Who told Hale?" She didn't answer, but her eyes gave it away. "Charles Harlow." Nathan closed the folder. "Thank you, Anna. You've said enough." He pushed into Hale's office. Dust sat where files should have been. A drawer held a single folder marked with Isabel's delivery date. But instead of medical notes, it contained offshore bank codes. Money laundering. The clinic wasn't just hiding a birth. It was part of Harlow's empire. Nathan slipped the folder into his coat. Valor barked sharply, eyes fixed outside. Across the street, a man leaned on a lamppost, pretending to smoke. Nathan recognized the stance. One of Harlow's men, watching. He tightened his grip on the file. "We've got what we came for," he muttered, guiding Valor out. The man flicked his cigarette and disappeared into the alley. A message as clear as any words. "We see you." Nathan returned to his cruiser, buckling the infant in back. For a moment, he sat, the weight of the file pressing against his chest. Isabel erased. The baby nearly drowned. A clinic bent to Harlow's will. "Not anymore," he whispered. Valor pressed his nose against Nathan's arm, as if in agreement. That night, Willow Creek lay quiet under the pines. Nathan sat in his rocking chair by the fire, the infant swaddled in his arms. The baby stirred, fists twitching in dreams. Nathan fed him slowly, watching as tiny fingers curled around his own. "Your mama loved you," Nathan murmured. "She left a trail so someone would find you. She mattered, and so do you." The baby's grip tightened, impossibly strong for something so small. Nathan blinked hard, feeling the weight of every burial he'd stood through, every family broken by men like Harlow. This child would not be another casualty. Valor stirred near the hearth, ears twitching at every creak. Loyal, steady, watchful, he seemed to know the child's survival carried meaning bigger than any of them could see. Nathan rocked gently, the fire's glow painting the walls. Shadows bent like presences unseen, and for a moment he felt Isabel near, her spirit lingering. "If you can hear me," Nathan whispered, "I'll keep him safe. He'll grow up knowing he was wanted, that you mattered." The baby's eyes opened briefly, dark and searching, before drifting back to sleep. Nathan felt the thread, the bond between mother, child, and himself, woven tight. He looked into the embers. "We'll find her," he vowed softly, "or at least the truth Harlow tried to bury. And when we do, this town will know." Outside, the night pressed close, pines groaning in the wind. Inside, Nathan Cole sat with the child in his arms, Valor watchful at his feet. The sheriff's resolve hardened like steel. He wasn't just fighting for law and order anymore. He was fighting for a promise. And Nathan Cole was not a man who let go. The morning sun had just broken through the clouds when Sheriff Nathan Cole tightened the strap of his jacket and adjusted the rifle across his shoulder. Rain had rinsed the night clean. Pine and damp earth cut the air like mint. Willow Creek's forest stretched ahead, deep, layered, withholding. The kind of quiet that stored secrets. Valor padded at his side, breath steaming, ears high. Where Nathan saw shadow and green, the German shepherd read a second world. Scent ribbons, footfall ghosts, threads of sound the human ear would miss. Nathan didn't plan to take the ridge trail today. But the hunch had nagged him awake. Harlow's boys were slipping through the backwoods. Too many crates, no one saw. Too many whispers over coffee about trucks moving under the moon. "Easy, boy," he said, more for himself than the dog. Unease hummed in his gut like a wire. Valor stiffened. A low rumble traveled the dog's chest. "What is it?" Nose to earth, then up to wind. The shepherd veered off trail without asking permission, threading trees with a clear intent that yanked Nathan straight into the brush. Branches slapped shoulders, wet needles kissed his cheek. The deeper they pushed, the heavier the silence became, as if even birds were holding their breath. The ground dipped into a shallow pocket, half masked by fallen limbs and pine thatch. Valor circled, hackles raised, pawing at a spot that didn't belong. Nathan saw it then, the corner of a dark tarp, its edges anchored with stones. "Good boy," he breathed, kneeling. The stench rose first, fuel cut with something chemical and sour. He pulled back the tarp. Stacked 3 deep were wooden crates dressed in false labels. Agricultural supplies. He didn't need to pry to know better. "Contraband," he said, scanning the tree line. The quiet was wrong. Valor raked claws at one crate. Nathan slid his knife under the lid and levered. Inside, tight bundles swaddled in brown. The familiar tang of untaxed liquor. Cartons of cigarettes. At the bottom, smaller bricks sealed in thick plastic that burned his nose even through the wrap. Drugs. Enough to keep a town compliant, a council quiet, and a king comfortable. His jaw set hard. This wasn't a dead stash. It was a live artery, which meant the body would return for it, soon. Valor dragged teeth under a second tarp, peeling it back. More crates, more poison. Nathan steadied his breath and photographed everything. Labels, nail patterns, the geometry of the hide. Each click felt like a step deeper into a war. For half a heartbeat, his mind flashed to the baby pulled from the river, now safe in Clara's arms at the hospital. The image honed his resolve to a point. He rolled the cover back into place and brushed needles over their prints. "We move," he told Valor. But the shepherd didn't step. Body locked, gaze pointing up toward the ridge. A sound rode the wind. At first a suggestion, then a certainty. Engines. Nathan slid to the bole of a pine. "Looks like we're not alone." The growl swelled, tearing the quiet. 2 trucks shouldered into the clearing, headlights cutting the mist into knives. Tires churned wet soil. Men jumped down before engines died. 5 of them, rough and efficient, armed. Used to violence. Too many for a clean standoff. Too late to walk away. "Stay close," Nathan whispered, the rifle snug into his shoulder. Valor leaned into his leg, steady. Flashlights combed the clearing. One boot tapped the tarp. "Told you," a man laughed. "Harlow keeps this place locked." "Then why do I see footprints?" a colder voice asked. Nathan glanced at his own boots. Mud traced their path. The light swung toward his tree. No more time. He stepped out. "Sheriff's office. Drop." Gunfire tore apart the rest. Bark exploded above him, splinters stinging his scalp. He fired twice. One man spun and dropped with a scream. Valor launched, a black and tan projectile, teeth burying into a gunman's forearm and driving him into the mud. The shepherd's growl raked the night. Rounds chewed the earth near Nathan's feet. He dove behind a fallen log as bullets stitched the trunk. He swapped mags by feel, breath burning his ribs. "They're pinning us," he muttered. Movement flickered left, flankers. He shot once and saw a silhouette drop, then flattened again as return fire scythed the air. Valor backed to him on command, the dog's chest heaving, eyes blazing. Without the dog, Nathan knew, he was already dead. "Go," he hissed, and Valor tugged his sleeve, dragging him low, pulling him through brush toward darker trees. Branches snapped. A round grazed his shoulder, heat and sting searing through cloth. He stumbled, but the dog hauled harder, refusing to surrender the living weight. They slid behind a rock outcrop, as another volley smacked stone into sparks. Chips bit his cheek, blood salting his tongue. He blind-fired 2 rounds to buy breath, then listened. The clearing roared with voices, then fractured into a stuttering silence. A lean figure broke from the pack, sprinting for the trees. "Tell Harlow!" he shouted over his shoulder. "Tell him it's the sheriff!" Nathan steadied his sight for the shot, then lowered the barrel. Too far. Too many variables. The message would run, and maybe that was right. Let Harlow know the board had shifted. His hands trembled as adrenaline drained. Valor pressed his muzzle against Nathan's wrist, a brief, grounding ritual. The forest smelled like gunpowder and fresh blood. "You saved my life," Nathan said, voice raw. Valor's tail thumped once, solemn as a vow. They returned to the crates. The tarps were ragged where rounds had clawed them. One box sat cracked by a ricochet. Nathan pried and froze. An envelope lay wedged between a false bottom and the crate wall. Thick, water-stained. He slid his knife under the flap and eased it open. Invoices. Manifests. Letters, coded but not impenetrable. Handwriting disciplined, like a man who believed to control clerks' chaos. Aliases hid recipients, but the patterns told the truth. Offshore numbers in the margins. Caribbean shells, Swiss routes, 12 shipments labeled timber, with weights that lied. Hush money, disguised as charity. Council dates that aligned with cargo nights. A judge's initials that matched the smirk Nathan had never trusted. And one line, smudged but legible enough to chill him, "Ensure silence. The river solves everything." His throat closed. The basket, the infant, the river as a ledger eraser. The cruelty of that calculus stunned him into stillness. This wasn't vice. It was governed by fear. He crouched lower, spreading pages on damp ground. Rain ghost moisture mottled the ink, but the bones showed clear. The web wasn't just Harlow. It braided business owners, councilmen, that judge, even a note about a former sheriff who had retired under a polite cloud. This empire ran older than he'd let himself suspect. Valor nudged a sheet with his nose. "You're right," Nathan said. "This isn't contraband. It's the skeleton key." He repacked the envelope and slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket, under his heart. Dangerous to carry. It's impossible to leave. He'd make copies, hide them where Harlow's money couldn't reach. A leaf trembled above him. He scanned. Nothing but restless canopy. Still, nerves prickled. One man had fled. Word was already traveling. "We're hunted now," he told Valor, almost calm. "At least we know the terrain." The shepherd rested his head against Nathan's arm for a heartbeat. Then both of them stood. Before he left, Nathan took one more photograph. The crates, the labels, the outraged geometry of a lie laid bare. He pulled the torn canvas back into place, arranged branches over footprints, and left the bodies for the law that would come. A wounded man groaned in the brush. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he didn't finish what the night had started. Let him crawl. Let him deliver the story. The sheriff had found the beating heart. They ghosted into trees, swallowed by shade. Behind them bled poison in crates, and 2 men cooling in mud. In Nathan's pocket rode paper teeth. The descent toward town threaded fog. Even the forest seemed to listen. Valor walked level with his hip, step sure, the rhythm of a partner who did not look over his shoulder for doubt. Nathan touched the envelope again. The weight felt heavier than metal. Inside his chest, something settled. Not just duty, but purpose. honed to purpose. He pictured the baby in Clara's arms, the child who had gripped Nathan's finger with a desperate, living will. He pictured Isabel, the unseen mother whose name was almost erased, clawing air to hold what men had stolen. He saw the council dais, the judge's placid mask, the town that had learned to speak quietly so it wouldn't be heard by the wrong ears. No more. He and Valor moved like a single thought through the last stand of pines, the town's edge soft in the grey. Somewhere, a chain clinked against a flagpole, a hollow sound in the morning hush. Somewhere a diner door breathed open and closed, gossip heating the room with lies braided into half-truths. Somewhere a man named Harlow waited for a report that would sour his coffee. Nathan glanced at the dog. Valor blinked once, eyes ember bright. "Now the real fight begins," Nathan said. He didn't say it to be brave. He said it because it was true. Back at the cruiser, he cleaned his cheek with the corner of a shirt and taped gauze over his shoulder. He shot each page in the envelope again with his phone, then drove. No lights, no siren, down a service road that kept him out of sight. He stopped twice to make copies, tucked them into dead drops he'd used for informants in better years. A grain bin outside town, the hollow under a church stoop where the foundation had cracked, and no one had gotten around to fixing it. He texted a single contact, a state investigator who owed him 2 favors and a funeral. By noon the town moved like any other day. Farmers haggled over feed. A postal van coughed up the hill. An old man on Main worked the broom like a memory. To the eye, nothing had changed. But Nathan had brought a knife to the hidden roots. He parked behind the hospital where Clara worked and sat with the engine off, the silence loud enough to feel. He thought of the line again. The river solves everything, and his hand found the envelope, as if to anchor himself to the opposite belief. People were not problems to be fixed by water. They were lives, and some lives were small enough to fit into a basket, and all of them deserved more than the arithmetic of a rich man's fear. Valor rested his head on the console. The dog's posture was easy at last, though one ear still listened for a world that loved suddenness. "Home," Nathan said, and started the engine. On the way, a black sedan purred past in the opposite lane. The driver never turned his head. He didn't need to. Nathan knew who owned that particular shade of paint. He didn't look back either. The cabin greeted them with quiet and the faint smoke ghost of last night's fire. Nathan locked the door, set the rifle in the stand, and laid the envelope on the table like an altarpiece. Valor circled once and dropped with a sigh. The afternoon stretched thin and bright. For the first time in a long time, the sheriff felt the ground under him hold. He stood over the papers and let himself feel the cost. 2 dead men and a wounded shoulder at a forest's edge. A town coiled tight under a smiling tyranny, a child who had almost become a solved problem. He let the anger come and then cool into craft. Then he got to work, printing, sealing, labeling copies for a judge who didn't owe Harlow his conscience, for the investigator who still believed in the job, for the editor of a regional paper who'd once told Nathan, "Bring me proof, not rumors." He whistled once. Valor padded over, leaning to nudge his knee, as if to say the next part would not be done alone. "Yeah," Nathan said. "We finish this together." Outside, a breeze shouldered the pines. The light shifted on the table, brightening the silver of the paperclip, the pale map of a shipping manifest, the sharp, small words that had almost ended a life. The river might erase evidence. It would not erase this. Not while Nathan Cole breathed. Not while Valor watched the door. He folded the last packet, set it aside, and finally allowed himself a breath that wasn't cut by urgency, Not relief. Never that. Just the clean air of a man who had stepped onto the right path and felt it answering underfoot. He looked down at the dog. "We've got him, Valor." The shepherd's tail ticked once against the floor, and somewhere across town, a man named Harlow watched a runner pant into his office and stammer the sheriff's name like bad news. The empire would stir. It would send trucks and threats and polite invitations. It would weaponize rumor and hire men who wore suits in daylight and masks at night. Let it come. Nathan picked up the envelope and slid it into his jacket, under the bone that refused to bend. This was the opening shot. He would not miss the rest. The old town hall of Willow Creek stood like a relic, timbers groaning, windows streaked with dust and rain. Tonight, every seat was filled. Farmers in worn coats pressed shoulder to shoulder with merchants in clean shirts. Whispers sparked like static. All of them had heard the rumor. Sheriff Nathan Cole had uncovered something tied to Charles Harlow, and for the first time in decades, someone was willing to say his name aloud. At the front, an oak table gleamed under the lamps. Councilmen shuffled papers they didn't read. Nathan stood in the light, uniform neat, face carved by sleepless nights. At his boots, Valor, ears pricked, body tense. Beside Nathan's hand lay a thick envelope, its corners blunted from the risks he'd carried it through. He cleared his throat. Silence fell. "I didn't call this meeting to stir fear, but to speak truth. For too long, Willow Creek has lived under Harlow's shadow. What I've uncovered makes silence no longer an option." He fanned pages across the table, manifests, bank records, coded letters. The paper rustled like dead leaves. These show Harlow's wealth isn't trade, it's smuggling. Not small jobs. An empire. Offshore accounts. Bribed officials. Blood on his hands. A gasp rippled from the benches. Mrs. Fletcher, whose son had died in a warehouse, pressed a hand to her mouth. Councilman Briggs leaned forward. "Are you saying Harlow's men control our routes?" "Not just the routes," Nathan said. "The silence. Judges, officers, even this council, paid off, or threatened worse." Murmurs grew. At the far end, Councilman Everett leaned back, smirking. Nathan raised a hand. "2 nights ago, Harlow's men ambushed me to stop this evidence. He knows what I carry. Now you do too." Everett slammed his palm. "Madness. You expect us to trust scraps of paper over the word of a benefactor. Harlow built our roads, funded our schools. Bought your vote too," someone muttered. "Donations don't erase crimes," Nathan said. "Roads don't justify murder. This isn't about what he gives. It's about what he takes. He nearly took an infant's life to protect his name." Faces split, some wet with anger, others tight with fear. Councilwoman Margaret Hayes rose. "Sheriff, what exactly are you asking of us?" "Courage," Nathan said softly, his voice carrying to the doors. "I'll take this evidence to the state if I must, but Willow Creek deserves the chance to cleanse itself. Stand with me." The hall trembled between silence and uproar. A widow's voice broke first. "My husband died in Harlow's mill. They called it an accident. I've never believed it." Another man stood. "I've seen his trucks. We all knew. We were scared to speak." Everett barked. "Defy Harlow, and he'll crush this town." Valor rose, growl shaking the floorboards. Everett faltered. Nathan rested a hand on the dog's back. "Fear is his weapon. This dog dove into a river to save a child. If an animal can show courage, surely we can too. Applause clashed with shouts. Briggs nodded grimly. Hayes lifted her hand in support. Everett muttered curses, eyes flicking toward the lamps as if measuring how far light reached. Nathan gathered the papers, pressed the envelope to his chest. With you or without you, I move forward. Willow Creek is worth the fight. And fight, I will. Valor barked once, sharp as a seal. The council adjourned in noise. Some pressed close with quiet thanks. Others slipped into the night, faces pale with fear. By the time Nathan and Valor stepped outside, a divide had carved itself deep. Half had found a spark. Half clutched their chains. Nathan felt the blade of certainty. The war for Willow Creek's soul had begun. The cabin door hung ajar when Nathan returned home. His gut dropped. He slid from his truck, revolver drawn. Valor hit the dirt low, growling like thunder. Inside, wreckage. Drawers gutted, chair splintered, baby supplies shredded. Powdered formula dusted the floor like ash. On the crib he'd built with his own hands, a message carved deep. Stay out, or the next cut is deeper. A thin cry sliced the air. The back room. Nathan sprinted. Valor vaulted ahead. The infant lay swaddled, terrified, but untouched. Nathan scooped him up, revolver sagging useless as the child pressed into his chest. You're all right. I won't let them touch you. Valor prowled the corners, teeth bared at the open window. Curtains breathed. They'd come like shadows and left the same way. Each sob from the child drilled into Nathan's ribs. Fear, anger, protectiveness so fierce it hurt. This wasn't about money anymore. They knew about the baby. He patched the crib with rough boards enough for the night, left the carved warning where it was, let it burn itself into his resolve. The baby slept at last. Nathan rocked in the splintered chair, revolver in one hand, blanket in the other. Valor lay guard, unblinking at the door. For the first time in years, Nathan prayed. Not for himself, but for strength to protect what had been placed in his care. Dawn bled gray. Rain slicked the streets. Nathan stood on the office steps, jaw set, eyes burning from an hour of sleep. Waiting for law to work felt like a furnace. A figure hurried up Main. A young woman in a trench, auburn hair knotted, satchel crosswise. Boots splashed puddles. Valor rose, muscles drawn. Nathan steadied him. She stopped at the steps. Sheriff Cole? That's right. And you are? Claire Whitmore. Journalist, independent. For now. She pulled a battered notebook from her satchel. I've followed Harlow for months. Smuggling routes, bribed officials, shipments gone missing, and whispers about women silenced. A young mother who vanished after giving birth. Isabel. The name punched Nathan's chest. His eyes flicked to the office window, where inside the infant slept in a borrowed cradle. Claire noticed. You found the child, didn't you? She said softly. Not a question. Nathan stayed silent. She leaned closer. Then you need me. Harlow's reach is everywhere. Alone, they'll bury you. Expose it beyond this town, and they can't. Nathan's gaze sharpened. Why risk it? My father worked the docks until Harlow bought the contracts. He drank himself into the ground. I promised I'd put light where men like Harlow cast shadow, maybe reckless, but I won't walk away, not with a child in the middle. Valor nudged Nathan's leg. A partner's counsel. Claire slid a photograph across. Crates in a warehouse, markings identical to Nathan's manifests. "You've been inside," he said. "Close enough to know the timber company is the pipeline. Close enough to know Isabel never left Willow Creek. Someone hid her. Maybe they still are." The baby's thin cry floated through the window. Claire's face softened. "He sounds strong." "Stronger than most men," Nathan murmured. Silence. Then Nathan offered his hand. "All right, Miss Whitmore. If we do this, understand. This isn't about headlines. It's about justice. About giving that child a future." Her grip was firm. "Then we want the same thing." Valor barked once. Approval. Inside, Claire drifted to the cradle, whispering, "You're why this matters." Then harder. "Harlow suspects. He'll tighten his grip. You need to be ready." Nathan brushed his revolver's grip. "Then let's be ready." She opened her notebook. "We map routes, copy everything, dead drop it. 2 targets outside Harlow's reach, a state investigator and a judge with a spine, and we plan for retaliation." "Already started," Nathan said. "Dead drops last night. The investigator owes me 2 favors and a funeral." "Good," she nodded. "I'll bring the paper that still believes in ink." Nathan looked at the cradle, then Valor, then Claire. A sheriff, a dog, a reporter. Not much for a war. Enough to start one. Outside, the town woke up as usual. Somewhere on a hill, Charles Harlow sipped coffee, waiting for a report that would sour his mouth. Nathan pressed the envelope to his chest. "We moved today. No more waiting." Claire shouldered her satchel. "Then let's put light where he's kept shadow." Valor stood, ready. Nathan opened the door. The day met them with pale light, sharp chill. It felt like the first breath before a storm. The lamps in Nathan Cole's office burned low, casting amber across stacks of papers and the rifle in the corner. Outside, Willow Creek was hushed, save for the creak of the boardwalk and a dog's bark drifting from far off. Inside, the silence pressed down like a storm, waiting to break. Claire Whitmore leaned over the sheriff's desk, notebook open, her hands trembling with both urgency and restraint. She had spent months chasing whispers and scraps of truth. Tonight, the fragments had formed into something whole. "I need you to listen," she said, her voice low. "The rumors aren't just stories. Isabel, the baby's mother, is alive. She's being held in one of Harlow's warehouses by the river." Nathan's jaw tightened. Hearing it spoken aloud struck harder than he expected. His eyes shifted to the cradle in the corner where the newborn slept. Valor lay beside it, ears twitching at every sound. "You're certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing her. They say she hums a lullaby, the same one, over and over. It doesn't sound like madness. It sounds like grief, like a mother calling to someone who isn't there." The words pierced deeper than he cared to admit. He imagined the baby's small hand reaching for that song in the dark. But the sheriff in him pushed back. "Rumors don't hold in court. Storming a warehouse without a warrant would hand Harlow the very excuse he wants to bury us." Claire snapped her notebook shut. "And if you wait, she'll vanish like the others. No judge will sign papers against Harlow unless we give them proof they can't ignore." Nathan rubbed his temples. He had built his career on boundaries. Law against vengeance, patience against recklessness. But now, those lines blurred with the memory of a lullaby echoing from a steel wall. "Every instinct I have says to storm that warehouse, drag Isabel out, and put a bullet between Harlow's eyes. But the law doesn't run on instinct. If I cross that line, what future does this child have in a town where the sheriff bent the law to his will?" Claire softened. "You're not Harlow. You're the only one left who makes people believe justice matters." "Sometimes," Sometimes you have to risk the rules to save a life. Valor stirred at Nathan's feet, amber eyes steady, urging him wordlessly toward conscience. The baby whimpered in his sleep. Nathan lifted him, the warmth fragile but fierce against his chest. Maybe this isn't about warrants. Maybe it's about whether I can look this child in the eye one day and say I did everything I could. Claire leaned closer. Then we start here. She flipped her notebook open again, revealing maps and guard rotations. District 3. If we move before dawn, we'll have a chance. Valor rose, pressing his head against Nathan's knee. The choice was made. Nathan laid the child back in the cradle and buckled on his gun belt. We're going tonight. The night wrapped Willow Creek in drizzle. Shadows stretched long, the streets hushed under the weight of rain. Nathan moved along the edge of the warehouse district, collar high, boots soundless on gravel. Valor padded beside him, a compass of muscle and instinct. Claire had stayed at the office to monitor for signs of Harlow's men, but Nathan knew if anything went wrong, he and Valor would bear it alone. The warehouses loomed like hulking beasts, their metal siding streaked with rust. Dim yellow lights cut narrow cones into the mist, leaving plenty of shadow. Nathan slipped through a gap in the fence with Valor at his side. Cigarette embers glowed faintly, where guards loitered, their voices careless, men too sure of their own protection. Then it reached them. A hum, fragile, quivering, the unmistakable tune of a lullaby. Nathan froze, letting it wash over him. Not rumor, not hope. Proof. Isabel was alive. They crept closer, hugging crates and barrels until they reached a smaller warehouse on the edge of the lot. Through a gap in the siding, Nathan saw a dim bulb swaying above a cot. A thin figure sat hunched, dark hair tangled, lips moving softly. Isabel. Her voice cracked as she pressed a tattered baby blanket to her face, humming into the cloth as though love itself might cross the distance. A guard passed nearby, oblivious. Nathan waited until he disappeared into the mist, then pulled back, his heart pounding. The proof was real, but proof meant war. Hours later, Nathan returned under cover of deeper night. Valor padded silently beside him. The guards outside smoked and muttered, their arrogance unchanged. Nathan struck quickly. One guard grappled and dropped, the other silenced by a pistol's butt. Together, man and dog slipped inside. The warehouse smelled of rust and damp. Isabel sat on the cot, clutching the red blanket, her head lifted at the sound of boots. Haunted eyes met his. Isabel, Nathan said softly, her lips parted, trembling. Who? I'm Sheriff Nathan Cole, he said. I've got someone who belongs to you. He drew the newborn from his coat. The baby stirred, crying softly. Isabel staggered to her feet, tears flooding her eyes. She collapsed forward as Nathan placed the child in her arms. The sound that left her throat was more than weeping. It was grief breaking open into hope. She pressed frantic kisses to the baby's head. Mi hijo. You're alive. Nathan turned away, giving her those first sacred moments. Valor pressed gently against her side, eyes calm, as though he too swore to guard them. But boots thundered outside. The warehouse door rattled. Nathan drew his revolver. No one's taking him, he told Isabel. The door burst open. Gunfire cracked. Nathan's shot dropped the first man. Valor lunged at the second, dragging him down in a snarl of muscle and fury. Nathan struck the man silent with the butt of his gun. Isabel rocked the baby, weeping lullabies into his ear. Nathan knelt beside her. He's safe now. Both of you are. She shook her head. Safe? Not while Harlow still breathes. Their eyes met, and Nathan knew she was right. And tonight was only the beginning. Valor returned to his side, muzzle bloodied, eyes steady. He lay close to Isabel and the baby, sentinel and shield. In that fragile circle, the sheriff, the mother, the child, and the dog, life had survived, love had endured, and justice was no longer a whisper, it was a fire. The small conference room in the sheriff's office smelled of paper, coffee, and rain-soaked wood. Outside, the storm had faded to a thin drizzle. Inside, truth waited like a loaded weapon. Isabel sat at the table, her newborn swaddled against her chest. Exhaustion still clung to her face, but her eyes, dark, steady, had hardened into steel. She was no longer a captive rumor. She was a mother, reclaiming her voice. Nathan took the chair opposite, pen poised, though he knew he would never need the ink. Valor sprawled by his boots, eyes half closed, ears wired to every sound. Claire Whitmore leaned against the wall, recorder blinking red. She had argued her way into this room because spoken truth, heard by multiple witnesses, could outlive a courthouse fire. Start wherever you need, Nathan said gently. Isabel's fingers traced the baby's cheek. She gathered herself, then began. I was 19 when I met Charles Harlow. The temperature in the room seemed to fall a degree. Nathan's jaw tightened. He came to the theater in Willow Creek. I sang there on weekends. He made me believe my voice was the future. For a while, I thought that meant love. Her mouth worked through a fragile smile that didn't last. It wasn't love. It was controlled. She told them how the tone of his promises changed the moment she said she was pregnant. His smile vanished. The eyes went cold. I became a stain to erase. He threatened me and my family. They locked her in one of his properties outside town. Guards at the door, no phone, no visitors. He told people I left. But I was still there, listening. She had overheard names in hallways where she wasn't meant to exist. Judges, officers, councilmen, smuggling routes through the forest. Boats by the river docks. Liquor, guns, drugs. When people disappeared, when evidence vanished, it was because those sworn to protect us were already purchased. Nathan's pen stilled. Names. Judge Rayner, Officer Briggs, Councilman Davenport and Hollis. She swallowed. They came to the house. I congratulated him on handling his problem. They meant me, and this child. Claire's recorder caught every syllable like a net. Horror flared in her eyes, but she didn't speak. When I went into labor, Isabel continued, he brought in a loyal doctor. He tried to take my baby. I fought. A nurse took pity. She hid a note in the basket as they carried him away. She said, maybe someone good will find this. Afterwards, they told me my son had drowned. They left me a ghost. She kissed the infant's crown, tears shining. Her gaze lifted to Nathan. But he lived, because of you, and because of valor. I'm holding him now. Nathan's throat worked. His hand found the shepherd's fur, gratitude anchoring him. Claire spoke softly. This can bring Harlow down, but it will also make you a target. I've burned in the shadows long enough, Isabel said. Let the light come. Nathan leaned forward, voice low. Then we stand with you. Valor's low rumble was not a threat, but a scent. Isabel began humming, and for the first time the lullaby sounded like survival, not grief. In that dim room, with a single buzzing bulb and a blinking recorder, Willow Creek's lines were redrawn. The sheriff's squad room transformed into a war map. Rain ticked against the windows. Files, photographs, and coffee-ringed maps carpeted the long oak table. Nathan stood at the head, jacket off, sleeves rolled. Isabel sat close to the cradle. Every glance at the sleeping child hardened her resolve. Claire perched forward, her notebook cross-hatched with names and arrows, the recorder still blinking. Deputies Mark Ridley and Anna Torres, two of the few Nathan trusted, took seats opposite. Mark's scarred hands wrapped a mug. Anna's rested near her pistol. Valor lay at the table's end, eyes tracking faces, ears tuned to the storm. "We can't wait for the state," Nathan said. "Harlow owns too many of them. If we give him time, he erases us." Mark grunted. "He always has. This time we've got a witness that he can't disappear." His gaze flicked to Isabel, respect tempering the gravel in his voice. "My testimony won't be enough," Isabel said. "He'll call me unstable. We need proof he can't spin." Claire tapped the files. "We have the shipment codes you found in the forest crates, plus offshore ledgers. But we need connective tissue, money trails, deeds, and a timeline that ties Harlow directly to the roots and to the attempt to steal Isabel's child." Anna slid a map forward, red pins stabbing the river and tree line. "These marks are drops we've logged. Every night we spotted unmarked trucks or boats. If we overlay Claire's transfers, we'll have a picture." Nathan nodded. "We'll need surveillance we can authenticate. Photos, audio, and a backup cache Harlow can't reach." "Off-site," Claire said. "My father's old print shop. He used to set type there. I've already turned it into a quiet workspace. He won't think to look." Mark stared at the pins. "What about manpower? He's got a small army. We've got 4 and a dog." Valor's head lifted on cue. Nathan rubbed his ears. "Sometimes one is enough. Still, we'll call in outside favors. I have a contact at the State Bureau who owes me," Anna said. "If we whisper, she might move before Harlow buys her silence." "And once I publish the first piece," Claire added, "national eyes turn here. He thrives in the shadows. Light starves him." Silence settled. The baby's soft breathing split the tension. Nathan broke it. "Accept what this means. He won't go quietly. He'll come for witnesses, files, and anyone who stands between him and the dark." Isabel touched her son's hair. "Let him come. I already lost everything once. He won't take my child." Mark's mouth quirked. Half grimace, half allegiance. "Then we fight." "We fight," Nathan said. "Smart, not loud. Every scrap gets duplicated and moved. No leaks." Claire snapped her notebook shut. "Then let's give him something he can't silence." Thunder rolled over the rooftops like distant artillery. A task force was born, not out of politics, but necessity. The lamps dimmed. The rain thinned to a hush. Fatigue settled over the room in a heavy cloak. Mark brewed another pot. Anna stripped and reassembled her weapon by muscle memory. Claire outlined the first story's spine. Nathan watched the street glisten under the street lamps. Valor dozed near Isabel, a sentinel pretending to sleep. At the back, Deputy Carl Jensen kept his head down. Broad-shouldered, veteran quiet, a man Nathan had trusted for years. His phone lay face down. The screen had flashed once, just once, before going dark. Valor's ears pricked. His body went rigid, a low growl igniting deep in his chest. Nathan turned. "What is it, boy?" The shepherd slid to the door, nose pressed into the crack. Anna stood at once, thumbed the switch. One lamp died, shadows pooling. Then came the sound, tires grinding gravel. Too many, too heavy, trucks braking just beyond the reach of the light. Voices, urgent and hushed. Claire's pen paused mid-stroke. "Nathan," she whispered. "Positions," he snapped. Mark shouldered a shotgun. Anna killed the last lamp by the door. Isabel curled over the cradle, cocooning the baby with her body. Claire scooped the files and recorder like a paramedic with a heart. The first shot shattered the window. Glass showered the table. Automatic fire hammered the walls. Wood splintered where Nathan had been standing a second before. Valor lunged, yanking his handler toward the back corridor. "Out the rear!" Nathan barked. Mark fired through the broken pane, controlled, punishing blasts that forced the shadows outside to duck. Anna covered her stance with a quiet dare for anyone to cross the threshold. Jensen lingered in the corner, mouth tight, gun unfired. His hand twitched toward his pocket. Valor wheeled on him and loosed a snarl that peeled paint. Nathan saw it dawn, like a knife glinting in moonlight. Betrayal. "Carl," Nathan said, voice rough with shock. "What did you do?" Jensen's lips parted. No words came. Boots hammered the porch. The floor thudded under the weight of men. There was no time for judgment, not yet. Survival was the only verdict. "Move!" Nathan hauled Isabel and the cradle toward the rear exit. Claire ran at their flank, clutching folders to her chest. Mark and Anna fell back by inches, shooting, reloading, counting heartbeats. They burst into the alley. Rain hissed on gravel. Bullets snapped splinters off the doorframe. The sheriff's cruiser rang like a bell when rounds found metal. Valor took point, tugging left so hard the leashes of habit snapped in Nathan's mind. The shepherd pulled them into a narrow cut between two sheds a heartbeat before a grenade clattered to where the group had been. The blast rolled the office in a wave of fire. Heat slapped their backs. Smoke coughed out into the alley like a wounded thing. The shockwave knocked them to the dirt. Isabel cupped her baby beneath her, taking the earth on her shoulder. Claire curled around the files. Nathan's ears rang. The world swam in ash and sirens that might not have been real. "Sound off," he shouted. "Standing," Mark rasped, hauling himself up. "Torres?" "Here." Anna dragged Claire to her feet, eyes already back on the mouth of the alley. Valor reappeared out of the smoke, chest heaving, muzzle wet with someone else's blood. He planted himself between the danger and the child, and didn't blink. Jensen was gone. Somewhere in the confusion, he had slipped toward the trucks he had summoned. The betrayal was complete. Nathan's gut twisted, grief and fury bound tight. He had trusted that man with his life more than once. The debt had come due in fire. He grabbed Valor's ruff. The dog met his eyes, lava calm. "Good boy," Nathan breathed. "You just saved us." The shepherd's stare said only, "Not finished." Nathan turned to the others. "Harlow knows we're coming. From now on, trust no one outside this circle. We move in shadow, or we don't move at all." The baby's cry rose above the engines, a thin human note against the machinery of violence. Isabel rocked him, humming through tears, a lullaby that had once learned sorrow, now refusing to surrender to it. They ducked through backyards and alleys, cutting the town along lines Nathan knew by muscle. Old fences, narrow gates, the broken step behind the butchers that never squeaked. Claire split the files into thirds and stuffed them in 3 different bags. Mark and Anna traded weapons without a word. Twice, they saw flashlights knifing the dark. Twice, Valor stopped them cold with a growl, and they held, and the beams passed. They reached the old print shop at last, Claire's safe house. The scent of ink still lived in the floorboards. Claire wedged a steel bar across the rear door. Mark shoved a filing cabinet against the front. Anna unrolled a map on the press bed and marked their escape routes in pencil. Isabel laid her child in a drawer lined with blankets, an improvised cradle, then knelt beside him, palm to his chest, counting breaths more faithful than clocks. Nathan stood in the middle of the ghostly machines, and felt the world tilt. The sheriff's office, his anchor of law, was a torch behind them. The only shield they had left was each other, and the truth that wanted the light. He looked at Claire. Publish the skeleton tonight. Not the names we can't protect yet, but enough to make this town look up. She nodded, jaw tight. Front page, national pitch by dawn. Anna, call your contact, Nathan said. No trail. Payphone by the rail yard. Tell her what we can prove and what will be public before dawn. She holstered her weapon. On it. Mark, Nathan said. Pull the old confiscation logs. Find anything we seize that disappeared on paper. If we can prove it reappeared in Harlow's warehouses, we've got our chain. Mark's mouth twitched. Always kept my own copies. In case City Hall decided we were sloppy. He tapped his temple. Old dog, old tricks. Nathan knelt by the drawer where the baby slept. Valor lay alongside, chin on paws, eyes somewhere between feral and faithful. God, Nathan whispered. The shepherd didn't move, but the room seemed safer by an inch. Isabel looked up at Nathan. Smoke had smeared the night along the line of his jaw. This never ends while he breathes, she said quietly. It ends, Nathan said. Not because we're louder, because we're patient and precise. Claire slid the first typed paragraph out of the platen, ink still wet. Willow Creek has long pretended not to see the shadow at its center. Tonight, a mother returned from the grave to say its name. Rain thickened on the roof. Sirens wandered the streets like rumors. Somewhere, trucks idled with their lights off. Nathan faced the door. We make 3 moves at once, he said. Publish, call, cross-reference. We scatter copies and stash evidence where a fire can't reach. And Harlow? Mark asked. Nathan's eyes hardened. We make him chase ghosts while we build a case even his friends can't carry. He pictured Jensen's empty corner, the way trust could turn to kindling in a single text. He pictured the sheriff's office, shattered glass, doubled-over desks, and felt something in him settle into place, heavy and cold. We survived, he said. That means we fight. Isabel began to hum again, an anthem now. Claire rolled new paper into the press and kept typing. Anna vanished into the rain, hood up, steps silent. Mark rifled through old folders like a man cracking open a reliquary. Valor didn't blink. Outside, the drizzle stitched the town together with threads of silver. Inside the old print shop, a different kind of storm gathered. Ink, proof, witness. The first pages would go out. The calls would be made. The map would be redrawn with routes only the desperate and the brave could follow. Harlow had always believed shadows made him invincible. Tonight, the light learned how to shoot back. Just after sundown, gunfire shattered the quiet hills around Willow Creek. At first, it was a single crack, then another, and another, until the rhythm of violence rolled like distant thunder. From the ridge, Sheriff Nathan Cole saw headlights weaving along dirt roads, rifles glinting in the trucks, flames licking at the Miller farmhouse. Charles Harlow had unleashed his fury. The town itself was under siege. Valor stood at Nathan's side, hackles high, growl vibrating like a warning bell. Nathan's stomach knotted. It's not just about us anymore, boy, he murmured. This is about all of Willow Creek. Behind him, Claire Whitmore appeared, pale but resolute. They're targeting civilians, she said. Mark Ridley, shotgun in hand, cursed as he spotted the blaze. That's the Millers. 2 kids. Ana Torres checked her pistol, face hard. No more shadows. He's made this war public. Nathan's voice was iron. Then we stand, for the people who can't fight back. He ordered Isabel to stay hidden in the barn with her baby, then signaled Valor. Let's move. The outskirts were chaotic. Smoke twisted through the sky, flames chewed at wood. Families fled into the dark, clutching children. Masked gunmen swept through like wolves, rifles spitting fire, laughter cruel. Nathan's deputies split, pulling families toward cover while trading rounds with the attackers. Claire, hands trembling, picked up a fallen shotgun and drove 2 men back. Nathan pressed forward, revolver steady, Valor a streak of muscle and fury. The shepherd tore rifles from hands, dragged gunmen to the ground, never faltering. A cry cut through the smoke. A child trapped against the burning farmhouse, a rifle aimed at her small frame. "Valor!" Nathan roared. The dog bolted, slamming into the gunman, teeth tearing cloth and flesh, until the girl bolted free into Nathan's arms. He set her into Anna's care, then turned back to the fray. By the time the last truck peeled away, the Miller farmhouse lay in ashes. Families huddled in the fields, alive but shaken, staring at the handful who had shielded them. Weary deputies, one determined reporter, and a relentless German shepherd. Nathan rested a hand on Valor's soot-streaked neck. "We hold the line, boy. For them. For all of them." Smoke and gunpowder still clung to the air when another shot split the night. A figure stepped from the tree line, rifle flashing. Nathan barely ducked behind a fence as bullets tore dirt at his feet. Then Valor moved. He lunged like lightning, jaws locking onto the attacker's arm, rolling him into the ground. The rifle fired uselessly into the dark. Another gunman charged. Valor threw himself at him too, dragging him into the underbrush with feral precision. Nathan fired, forcing the rest to retreat. But when the dust cleared, he saw blood streaking Valor's flank. The shepherd didn't falter, didn't even slow. He kept fighting until one of Harlow's men blindsided Nathan with a rifle butt. Valor hurled himself between them, taking the blow. The weapon cracked against his shoulder. Valor yelped but refused to release his grip. Nathan's shot finished the man, but the shepherd collapsed beside him, panting, blood soaking his fur. Nathan dropped to his knees. "Stay with me, boy." He pressed cloth against the wound, hands shaking. Valor's amber eyes met his, unwavering, as if to say he was still here, still loyal, still fighting. Townsfolk emerged from the fields, murmurs spreading at the sight of the bleeding dog who had saved their sheriff. "God bless him," someone whispered. "He saved us all." With help from Mark and Anna, Nathan carried Valor to the barn, Isabel's tearful gaze following every step. Inside, he laid the shepherd gently down, binding the wound with torn fabric. Valor exhaled, shallow but steady, leaning into Nathan's hands. Outside, the townspeople rallied, dousing fires, helping the wounded, fortifying their homes. Valor's courage had sparked something. Fear was giving way to unity. Nathan pressed his forehead to the shepherd's. "You've done enough, boy. Rest now. We'll finish this. For you, for them, for everyone." Valor nudged his hand weakly, eyes still burning with trust. Dawn broke through the haze of smoke, light falling on a battered town that had not bowed. Nathan stood on the steps of the hall, Valor bandaged but unyielding at his side. Claire, pale with exhaustion, sent Harlow's empire of documents to national outlets. Within minutes, headlines erupted. Corruption and smuggling exposed in Willow Creek. Local syndicate tied to judges, councilmen, police. Mother and child survive plot to silence them. Murmurs spread as townsfolk read the news, shock turning to anger, anger into resolve. From the highway, state patrols and SWAT convoys rolled in, lights cutting through the mist. Then Harlow appeared on the ridge, cigarette in hand, his men arrayed behind him. He looked down on the gathered crowd and reinforcements with mocking disdain. "It's over, Harlow," Nathan called. "The world knows. Surrender now." Harlow laughed, voice low and cruel. "You think a few files change anything? This town, this state, they're mine. And you, Cole, are just a dog handler playing the hero." Valor growled, amber eyes locked on the crime lord. Nathan's pulse quickened, but he held his ground. "You gambled on fear. Fear loses when people wake up. Your empire ends today." Claire stepped forward, projecting the damning documents on a portable screen. Bribed judges, crooked cops, smuggling routes traced in black and white. Harlow's bravado cracked. His men glanced at one another, weapons lowering. Some stepped back. Others dropped rifles entirely. The tide had shifted. Nathan placed a steady hand on Valor's head. "You underestimated us. This town's courage isn't for sale." For the first time, doubt flickered in Harlow's eyes. His empire, built on silence, was collapsing in the light. Reinforcements closed in. The townspeople pressed forward. Claire broadcast the truth to the nation. Valor stood taller despite his wounds, a living symbol of loyalty, courage, and the spirit of Willow Creek. "This is it, boy," Nathan whispered. "The turning point." And as the sirens wailed and the crowd's murmurs swelled into defiance, Nathan knew the reckoning had come. Harlow's empire was unraveling, not by force alone, but by truth, by unity, and by the unbreakable bond between one man, his town, and his dog. The night hung heavy over Harlow's mansion, the sky a hard, unforgiving black. Rain lashed the slate roof and slicked the marble steps, as though the storm itself meant to wash away the empire burning within. Through the windows glowed the faint orange of fire. Harlow's final act of desperation, an attempt to erase the evidence of years of smuggling, corruption, and violence. Nathan Cole crouched in the hedge line, soaked through, Valor pressed close at his side. The German shepherd's fur bristled, ears pinned, eyes locked on the house with the same sharp focus that had carried them through every close call before. Nathan laid a hand on him, feeling the dog's tense readiness. This wasn't just a partner at his side. It was loyalty, muscle, and instinct, bound together by months of danger and trust. The mansion doors flung open. Light and shadow spilled across the marble steps as Harlow appeared, silhouette jagged against the flames behind him. In one hand he clutched a briefcase, no doubt the last of his records, and in the other, a bottle of accelerant. His face was set, but Nathan saw the flicker of unease behind the arrogance. "It's over, Harlow," Nathan called, stepping into the storm with Valor at his side. "You can't run. Surrender now." Harlow laughed, bitter and raw. "You think you've cornered me? A sheriff, a dog, a handful of deputies? You think that's enough to take down what I built?" "You built it on fear," Nathan said. "But fear ends tonight." Harlow raised the accelerant, ready to burn the last of his empire. In that instant, Valor lunged. A flash of motion, a sharp growl, and the bottle was torn from Harlow's hand, shattering against the marble in a hiss of flame and rain. Harlow staggered, startled, then bolted through a side door. "Valor, stay," Nathan ordered, then sprinted after him. They crossed the sodden lawn, the rain turning the ground to mud. Harlow slipped and slid, clutching the briefcase like his last breath of power. But Valor was faster. He lunged, jaws clamping onto the hem of Harlow's coat, holding him fast without harm. Nathan seized his arm, dragging him down. Sirens wailed in the distance, reinforcements closing in. The fire blazed behind them, orange against the storm. Harlow thrashed, shouting, "I built everything. You don't understand." "You built nothing but fear," Nathan snapped, tightening his grip. "And fear doesn't last. This ends now." Moments later, police units swarmed the grounds. Harlow, handcuffed and broken, was led away. His mansion burned behind him, his empire collapsing into smoke and ash. On the rain-soaked lawn, Nathan laid a hand on Valor's head. The dog's eyes glinted, steady and calm, as if to say, "It's done." The courthouse felt like another world, calm, ordered, unforgiving. Morning light streamed through tall windows, falling across polished wood and stone. After months of chaos, this was the reckoning. Nathan sat at the prosecutor's table, Valor at his feet, head lifted but silent, sensing the solemn weight of the room. Isabel entered quietly, her baby clutched to her chest. Though her steps trembled, her eyes held a fire Nathan had never seen before, the resolve of someone who had survived the unthinkable. The gallery filled quickly. Townsfolk eager for closure, reporters hungry for a headline, law enforcement waiting to see justice served. When the judge entered and brought down his gavel, the room stilled into silence. Claire Whitmore, the journalist who had uncovered Harlow's first trail of lies, testified first. Her words were steady, her evidence ironclad. Coded letters, offshore accounts, shipments tied directly to Harlow. Then Isabel took the stand. Her voice shook, but her courage was unmistakable as she recounted the threats, the months of hiding, the violence endured. She held her baby close, whispering, "He wanted to erase everything, but I am here. My child is here. We will not be erased." A hush fell over the room. Even hardened deputies shifted in their seats. Valor's ears flicked toward her, tail thumping once against the floor, as if in quiet solidarity. Nathan testified next. He spoke plainly, recounting the raids, the contraband, the ambushes, the corruption snaking through local government. He described Valor's heroism, how the dog had intercepted threats, uncovered evidence, and in the end stopped Harlow from destroying it all. His words were not grandiose, just steady truths laid bare. The defense tried to sow doubt, but the evidence was overwhelming. Too many documents, too many witnesses, too much truth. At last, the judge spoke. "Charles Harlow, based on the overwhelming evidence and testimonies, you are found guilty on all counts: smuggling, bribery, conspiracy, and endangering innocent lives." The gavel fell. Relief rippled through the courtroom like a long, suppressed breath. Isabel wept, clutching her baby. Nathan sat back, Valor pressing against his leg, eyes calm, ears pricked. Justice had been served. Months later, Willow Creek was reborn. The morning sun washed the town in gold, no longer heavy with shadows but light with renewal. Storefronts reopened. Neighbors greeted each other without fear. Children's laughter carried across the streets, bright and unguarded. Nathan walked down Main Street, Valor trotting beside him, leash loose. The shepherd's fur gleamed, his eyes scanning every sound, ever watchful yet at peace. To the townsfolk, he was no longer just a police dog. He was a guardian, a hero, family. Ahead, banners fluttered at the community center. Isabel stood there, baby in arms, Claire at her side. Together, they were opening the Willow Creek Sanctuary, a haven for single mothers, a symbol of resilience born from Isabel's own survival. Townspeople gathered, smiling, volunteering, hopeful. Isabel caught Nathan's eye. "We couldn't have done this without you," she said softly, glancing at Valor. The baby reached out, tiny fingers tangling in the shepherd's fur. Valor rumbled low in contentment, leaning gently into the touch. Claire addressed the crowd. This center will be more than shelter. It will be education, support, hope. A reminder that even in the darkest times, loyalty and courage, human and canine, can lead us through. Then, with a smile, some heroes don't wear badges, some wear fur. Laughter rippled, warm and grateful. Nathan felt Isabel slip her hand into his. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe the fight was behind them. Valor lay at his side, ears twitching, tail thumping lazily against the ground. The baby laughed, bright and free, reaching for him again. In that sound, Nathan heard everything they had fought for: safety, trust, renewal. Willow Creek had been scarred, but it was alive again, not because the past was erased, but because people had stood together through it. The final image lingered: Isabel, her child, Claire, Nathan, and Valor, bathed in afternoon sun. A town reborn, a storm survived. And at the center of it all, a German shepherd whose loyalty had carried them through darkness into light. There's something quietly magical about the bond between a human and a dog, especially a German shepherd. Their loyalty is unwavering, their instincts finely tuned, and their love doesn't come with conditions or expectations. We watch them protect, guide, and comfort us in ways that words often fail to capture. Valor's story reminds us that love can take many forms, that courage can be silent but profound, and that the companionship of a dog can turn moments of fear into moments of hope. If you've ever felt that special connection with your dog, you know it's a relationship built on trust, patience, and shared understanding. Sometimes, all it takes is a little guidance to deepen that bond even further, whether it's learning how to communicate more clearly, understand their needs, or simply enjoy their presence in a richer way. For anyone who wants to explore that connection, there's a thoughtful resource that shares gentle, meaningful ways to strengthen the relationship with your dog. I've found it really insightful, and it might be just what you're looking for, to bring even more joy and understanding into the life you share with your furry companion. Because moments of love, loyalty, and trust, like those shared with a devoted dog, are worth every ounce of attention we can give.